Yes, hello. I was looking to unmute my micro. I am Hannes Lowagie. I work at KBR, so I changed the title a bit. I will speak at RDA at KBR, so we are the National Library of Belgium. So it's not really the whole Belgium, but as a national library, it's just I'm going to say something about how we started our implementation of RDA. First, very quickly, some words about the KBR and myself. So we are National Library of Belgium. As you see, KBR comes from Koninklijke Bibliotheek, Bibliotheek Royale, so Dutch and French are our two main languages. We have about 8 million documents, all kind of documents, contemporary books, serials, but also coins, manuscripts, prints, scores, etc. Most or oldest document object is this dagger from an Egyptian pharaoh. We have scores like from Johann Sebastian Bach, and we have some beautiful manuscripts like here. This is a miniature from Rogier van der Weyden. He's a famous Flemish painter, but he also made miniatures. And here you see the author is giving the book, in fact, to our Duke, Philip the Good. I work at the Bibliographic Information Agency, and we are responsible for the cataloging of all documents who come, contemporary books that come in KBR through legal deposit, gifts, and acquisitions. We have about 20-25 catalogers, so it's not very, very large team. But we started, I am head of the Bibliographic Information Agency since September 2021. And one of the first things I wanted to do was implement RDA. They talked already a lot about RDA, but there weren't not many real steps. So I tried today to explain how we did it or how we are doing it by making the analogy with a tree and the roots, because we are still at the roots. The tree is not there yet. But to start everything, so the basic condition we had to do was like to have fertile ground, and that means support of the KBR management. So our direction has to be okay that we change our cataloging practices. And that was reflected in an action plan that really made the link or the motivation towards linked open data. And we also have a special data strategy team who are really creating a strategy concerning all types of data, bibliographic data, born digital data, digitized data. I'm responsible for the part bibliographic data, where one of my things was so implement RDA. So that's, I think, it's just, I mentioned it because I think it's necessary for any institutions who want to make the switch to RDA to have that. We just started, so it's really new, and many of you already started, so it's not important anymore. But I think for us it was important, and because it's rather new that we have this fertile ground, I'll say. So we started with the application profile, and I saw a lot of similarities with everything I heard before. It's also an Excel file describing just RDA entities, a link, I can maybe zoom in, yes, RDA elements, a link to the toolkit, identification, and how we create this in MARC, because we also work in MARC 21. So we have to always make the link to MARC 21. Here you see obligation, yes, no, but maybe we can change it to the 0 from like the Dutch National Bibliotheek. I found it interesting, the 0, or must not include, something like this. So this was interesting to hear. But it's an Excel, and it's also made by, sorry, I'm going return. It's not publicly available. Even not every cataloger has access. They have access, but it's not communicated at real level. It's more something like, for us, a theoretical base to create the next step, and that is the change the guidelines. So change everything that existed, existing rules about cataloging, that we have to really, we had to look at every aspect and control, check if it's conform RDA or not. So it reviewed field by field if the current practices are acceptable or needs to change. And yes, in fact, a lot needed to change, and that was a difficult phase. It's not difficult to say, okay, we have to do it different now or that, but it was the communication with the catalogers or the implementation is a difficult phase. I also mentioned thank you RDA toolkit because it really helped us a lot, and I think it's a very useful tool to really understand every element and to know how to implement it, or to know what choices we had to make internally. So what are the options? So yeah, we really used it a lot. Sorry. Because we had, I also included a rock because there's some things that really make the growth of the tree. I don't know if it's good in English, but more difficult. And this is like the traditions, and at KBR it was all ISBD, so the ISBD traditions, and sometimes we decided when it doesn't conflict directly with the RDA guidelines, we leave it as much as possible just to make the transitions as smooth as possible. One of the most concrete changes was like ISBD is full of abbreviations, like yeah, you see them SN, SL. In RDA they have not so many abbreviations, but in a multilingual country like Belgium, so we have 50% French, 50% Dutch, and some German, but it's really small parts. So we mainly do everything in Dutch and French. I'm going to say it like this. It's a bit pity for the German-speaking part of Belgium, but the most is Dutch and French. But so the language of cataloging becomes more and more important. So for us, it was also important to create good rules that decide, okay, when we're going to use Dutch, when we are going to use French, when are we going to use German? So it's not directly linked to the language of the cataloger, but it's we have some rules that, okay, if it's the language of the document, it's Dutch, it has to get a Dutch record. If the language of the document is French, a French record. In German, it's a German record. But like for English or for other languages, it's the catalographer can choose his own language, so Dutch or French. We won't make descriptions in English or Spanish or Italian. It's only Dutch and French and some German. But it was something new, so we had to make these rules, and it was a really not so simple. It's because it's new, because in fact, like you see then the abbreviations IL-punt and P-punt for illustrations and pages. Yeah, it was a big advantage in Dutch. In Dutch and French, it was the same, so we could use it for. It was an abbreviation that everybody could understand, and when we really record illustraties of illustration in French, we really had to indicate this language of cataloging. So it's important that we had clear rules to have these rules, and this is like the steps we have taken so far. We went further, but to make this tree or the roots grow, or to make sure that the tree becomes a tree, we had to make it grow. And how did we do it? Like we created our own cataloging guidelines. So it's a bit like the handbook, where we put all the new guidelines. So conform RDA, how do we from now on going to record the name of publisher or the date of publication or the title, or but I wanted to have something online, so a web page, not like before a printed documentation or paper book, because it's more difficult to change something, and you have the disadvantage that old versions still circulate or are printed. And so I wanted to centralize everything in one page, Dutch and French on the same page, because in older documentation sometimes the French explanation was different than the Dutch explanation. So it had to be like, I don't know if you know the legal documents in Belgium, but it's 2 columns, one French, one Dutch. So it's a bit like the same ID, 2 columns next to each other. So that was the first. Second big step was we implemented a real-time check. So when the cataloger is creating his records, at the right part of his screen, he sees directly, okay, this is correct or this is not correct. Like when the cataloger will say still S point D point for like it has no date, it gets immediately a notification from please do not use S point D point anymore, but use this instead. And it was really helpful. I think it helped a lot the catalographers also to become aware of how the new rules were, that they didn't have to study all the new rules. No, by doing their work, they immediately knew what was wrong or what are the new rules. Yeah, this is an example. So this is our library management system, and you see, for example, Mark 2144, you see VP various places, but we have decided that it's better to avoid VP but to really mention all the places. So here at the right you see, okay, so it's in French, so it says do not use the code VP but repeat subfield A. For example, in 264 you have a strip because it's a journal like this. Then we say, okay, also do not forget to fill in the field 008. So 008, sorry, I was talking in French, to make the record conform RDA. And for example here, Mark 21 rather, another example, when a field is just empty or missing, it also say, okay, it's you have to fill in 337, for example. So with this, you see, it's not implemented in the library management system. It works with an XSLT that really checks all the fields, and it's shown in the library management system. So we didn't have to change anything in our library management system. We just had to show it's an external page our ICT department developed, and we show it's just an iframe of that page. So it's really easy, and I think it helped a lot. And the third part is the permanent training. That's something that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but that's really necessary, and that we still had to. We started it, but I felt that we had to do a lot more. You see, it's not that they don't understand it or it's too difficult. No, it's just to keep them posted about all new evolutions or all new things. Keeping the catalographers posted about the new rules can be done by the first 2, but just training is important to keep the yeah, to I don't know how to say it. Just it's not really to explain them, but it's rather to make sure they're doing it the right way. It's, I don't know if I put it right that way, but it's necessary. I'm going to say it like this. Second thing we had to do was like the fertilizer, and that's something I put here, but that's also something we started with. So we consulted like experts in RDA, informed us, like for example, for the language of cataloging, I know we talked with Ahava from Israel, because there you have a bit the same information. We invited Peter from the Netherlands to really how to get started with RDA. So it was really useful for us. but that's, I put it here because that's something we have to keep doing. It's not that it's done. So for every aspect, we keep informing us, we keep looking at other institutions, how are you doing it? Still, you have to make your own choices or your own choices, but it's very useful to know how others are doing it. I think this is where we are today. So we don't have the fruits yet, but the tree is more or less growing. We have 3 main projects, and it's really important projects, but they're still on the to-do list. Like, are we going to change subject indexing, and how, on a more entity-based manner? Which fields are we going to enrich with EURIG? Because you'll see maybe in our application for profile that a lot of fields are still unstructured, and that we still had to level it up. I don't know if that's correct English, but to enrich it with EURIG. But we have to make the good choices, because also the application profile is made for published documents, but I want to implement it also for like the manuscripts and the scores. So that has to be in collaboration with the other departments. We are only responsible for the published documents, and that I also started last month. So that will be a work for the coming year, for 2023, with the patrimonial sections, as we call that, see how we will make the switch to RDA for that kind of documents. How are we implementing RDA for the musical scores, etc. So for the choice for the URI to which library, which vocabulary we will link, I think it's important to have their input as well, to have something that's useful for them too. And then the relations. We had a lot of discussion about how we are going to add the work level, because that's really something new. Once that decision is made, how are we cluster records, or how we reshape the catalog? Because and at the bottom you see, it's my ambition to try to modify also the existing records. I don't know if it will be possible, but I think if we make a new rule, it's important that we create a uniform data set, and that all the records we have made in the last years are also changed following these new rules. But it's my ambition. I don't know if it will be possible, but that's the idea. Now, for the work level, we had many options. We could use a local field, a 900 field, and a local type of authority that our library management system had created. It has some advantages. It's easy to use, but it has some disadvantages because it's not really conform. RDA and not all kind of elements you can add. So now we're more like using the field 130 for the uniform, before used for uniform title, but that we're going to use that field also for the work level. But we have not made the decision yet, but that's now our preference. But that's on the to-do list, make a decision here. Some small words about the fruits that we don't have yet, but it's always important to know why we are doing all that, and what we really want to achieve. And it's maybe useless to say to you, but it's like to create uniform data. So that's also why I want to create all the existing records, because that's really a problem in our catalog, and maybe in all catalogs, is that data are not uniform. And when someone wants to search something in our catalog, he has to search that field, or maybe also that field, or maybe also that field. And that's something I really want to avoid in the future, so that we have one clear index, but also one clear field for certain type of data. So uniform data, linked data, I was a bit too fast. So linked data, so it can be more useful for research, but also more findable and accessible. I don't have to, I mentioned FAIR already, but that's why we need the URIs, and also that's why also our data has to be, now we're still working in Mark 21 in our local catalog, but we really want to make something a data service that our data are open and can be used for research. So that's something we don't have yet, but we are preparing to create. But but that's also why we have to change our cataloging rules and make the data uniform. And then the better public catalog, and that we are already preparing a bit to change that, our catalog, that it's like WIMI based, so work expression manifestation item, that someone would search a certain work, will he find first all the explanation about the work and then see what expression we have, and do we have a French text? Okay, and then all the manifestation of the French text of a certain work, so that we guide the user more when he does a search. Because when someone searches now Romeo and Julia in our catalog, he gets 200 records, and it's his task to really refine his search and find what he wants. But I think when we change our catalog, it will be better, so he can find first a bit of explanation about the work Romeo and Julia, when it's created by who, what is the subject of the play, and then what records do we have about Romeo and Julia of that, of Romeo and Julia. I'm going to say it like this. So, but this is prepared. It's not live, but we made our first steps in preparing. So this is the tree. The roots are there, the tree is beginning to grow, but we really have to do a lot of work to make it fully grown and to have the fruits. I added a little cloud on the left about what are my opinions, or what are our opinions. What do we think about RDA or about our process? And it's yeah, I'm going to him. I think sometimes we are confronted with the economic reality, and that is we have less catalographers for more publications. So our catalogers have no longer the time to really dive into the records and analyze every detail of the publication, and that's a pity, but it's just the reality. So we made everything as easy for the catalogers as possible. So we created an easy input form with the correction at the right. He really knows if it's correct or not correct. So sometimes we felt, or sometimes it feels like we have to simplify RDA or the model or like the application profile. It's not the cataloger his task to look into it. The RDA toolkit, we only have 5 people who have access to the RDA toolkit. It was a bit of discussion. Are we going to give access to all catalographers, and is it their task to look into the RDA toolkit, or do we just make a bit our choices and present that choices to our catalogers? So we have made the second choice, but that's sometimes pity, because the cataloger has to know his work in an RDA and confirm an RDA and why he's doing that. What's the advantage of working in RDA? And sometimes we have to hide a bit RDA and all the model and the LRM model we are trying to implement also. And he's creating records following that model, but he does not know how this model works, or why he's following this model. And sometimes it's that's a bit why we need the permanent formations. But sometimes, it's not good, but I think it's necessary, because just we have like 10 or 15 catalogers who really create the records for every book that comes in the KBR from the legal deposit. So it's really not that much. So they do not have the time to really look into the model, but at the back office, or maybe back office is not the right word, but we are doing everything so they are creating the right records and following the rules, but they do not have the time himself to to understand the whole model. I guess it's a bit the idea. I have to check if it's correct, or maybe they know exactly what they're doing, but I think it's a bit the idea I have of the sentiment I get. So that's a bit. Yeah, it's great to have a good model, and but it's a pity that we have to simplify it, or that we have to make it like more easy to use or something like that. I don't know how to say it, but that was my most important idea. Yeah, on the other hand, the last phase is a bit, we have more and more important meta also from Onyx. We have to reshape it to make them following our RDA KBR rules. So that's the first thing. And also the cataloger has still his task become more and more like analyzing the existing record than creating a new record from zero. So sometimes that's also a difficulty with our catalogers, that they prefer to create a record from zero. But it's important to import the metadata also for our prospection, and to know what is published in Belgium and what do we have to receive from legal deposits. So that's why we import the metadata. But for the cataloger's point of view, it's not ideal. But or his task, or the task of a cataloger, is changing. I'm going to more say it like this. I think that's my last slide. It's not really a slide, but that was a bit our steps and our idea about RDA, and we are excited for the future. We really want to implement more, certainly about the relations. I think that will be the key in the future, to look into how we're going to implement this our LRM model following Mark 21. But it's like for the work level, we really had 5 or 6 options how we're going to use it, and that I really want to know also how other institutions are doing it, if it's applicable for us, what's best for us, because it has to work for all departments, for all type of documents. So yeah, we'll see in the future how we're going to involve, but we are doing everything to make it work, or to make it yeah, make it work. Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. Other questions? Will you use identifiers to represent clustered records?
Yeah. Thank you. That's good.
Have more.
Hans,
are you already talking to suppliers that can develop a library management system that can publish linked data? Or do you think your current system will be able to make this change?
We have our current system since 4 years. So I don't think we can allow us, or I don't think our management will allow us to change the system. So no, we are not yet talking to other suppliers. We are working in our current library management system that's also linked to circulation and yeah, I don't know the word in English. In French, it's bulletinage. It's like keeping the check of every periodical, every number. So we are implemented in the national bibliography section from Share VDE, but we don't have concrete agreements with them already. We are implementing in this work group, and it's very useful for us and important, and we can give our input, or it's useful to keep up with the updates. And maybe we'll do that for the national bibliographic records, but it's only a part of the whole catalog. But for the whole catalog, we will still use our current LMS, and we will have to use Mark 21. And but maybe with our current LMS, we can talk, and they can also change their systems, and maybe they'll do it, maybe they don't. But why not? We'll try.
Can you tell us more about the validity check using XSRT you're doing? How does it work exactly?
So we have, when you create a record in our library management system, it's put online through the Z3950 protocol, and then we created a page that says, okay, take the record from that set 3950 protocol. We created an XSLT that really checks is this field existing in that record or not? Does that field contain S point, D point or not, etc., etc. And then we put the result of the XSLT, because in the XSLT we say if it's not present, say, oh, do not forget to create that record. And then we just show that the result of the XSLT in a web page, and that web page is shown at the catalographer. I wrote a little article about it in the IFLA bibliographic, or I don't know the exact name, newsletter, so maybe I can share the link once. But it's it's created. Simply said, it takes the record, it's checked with an XSLT, and it creates an analyze, and that analyze is shown to the catalographer.
One more. I guess I should have also asked which identifiers will you use for the cluster? That's the addition to the question. Yes, but, because the first question was will you use identifiers for the clusters?
Sorry, I thought it was a statement. I think when we will cluster a record, we will add like a work level, and that work level has an identifier, and that identifier will be the identifier for the cluster, but that work level will also be linked with an external identifier, like for a Wikidata entity or something like this. But for the clustering, we do not have yet taken any steps. We have someone who comes to in the next year try to work with that to make the clustering or to make the rules. How are we going to make the clusters based on what elements we can cluster or not? So we are still experimenting, but the idea is to, when we cluster a couple of records, we add the work level, and that work level will be your identifier for the cluster. I don't know if it's not just an external identifier. Yeah.
So thank you, Hannes. It's quite interesting to see these new times to RDA when you are starting this with all this background, and then you know how to try to avoid some problems that we have faced before. Yeah. I'm sorry, we have no more time. We are running a little late, so we will let Hava start. If anybody has any more questions to Hannes, you can ask in the question and answer section, and he will be answering them.